There's a parasite that lives in cat feces. It's called Toxoplasma gondii. And, well, there's a 50% chance it's in your brain right now. Not hiding in your gut, not dormant in your bloodstream. In your brain, actively changing how you think, how you behave, how you perceive risk. Here's what it does in mice. Toxoplasma has one goal: get eaten by a cat so it can reproduce. So it rewires the mouse's brain. Healthy mice avoid the smell of cat urine. It means death. But infected mice, they're attracted to it. They seek out cats. They want to be caught. The parasite deleted their fear and replaced it with suicidal attraction. Now, here's the terrifying part. Toxoplasma infects humans too. Over 2 billion people worldwide carry it. And the evidence suggests it's not just sitting there. It's doing something. Today, you're discovering the microscopic puppet master that might be pulling strings in your own mind right now. But before we dive into this biological nightmare, hit that like button if you're ready to question everything you thought you knew about free will. Drop a comment telling us if you've ever owned a cat or cleaned a litter box, because that matters more than you think. And subscribe to Untold Realms, because we're exposing the hidden forces controlling life on Earth that most people never learn about. Now, let's explore the parasite that turned mind control from science fiction into peer-reviewed reality. Understanding how this works requires following the parasite's journey. Toxoplasma can only reproduce sexually inside a cat's intestines. Nowhere else. Not in mice, not in humans, only cats. After reproduction, millions of microscopic oocysts, essentially parasite eggs, are shed in cat feces. A single cat can release hundreds of millions of these oocysts over just a few weeks. These oocysts contaminate soil, water sources, and vegetables. They're incredibly resilient. They survive in the environment for over a year. They resist freezing. They resist many disinfectants. When a mouse eats contaminated food or drinks contaminated water, the oocysts hatch in its digestive system. The parasites then do something remarkable. They don't stay in the gut. They actively invade the bloodstream. From there, they travel throughout the body, but they have a specific destination: the brain. Toxoplasma parasites cross the blood-brain barrier, the protective filter that keeps most pathogens out of our neural tissue. Once inside the brain, they form cysts. These cysts can contain hundreds of individual parasites, and they're permanent. The mouse's immune system can't eliminate them. They remain for the animal's entire life. But the parasite isn't just hiding there, it's actively manipulating brain chemistry. Studies have identified the exact mechanism. Toxoplasma increases dopamine production in specific brain regions. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter associated with reward and pleasure. The parasite also suppresses fear responses in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. The result? When an infected mouse smells cat urine, instead of triggering the normal fear response that causes the mouse to flee, the brain registers it as attractive. The mouse literally finds the smell of its predator appealing. It approaches cats instead of avoiding them. The cat eats the mouse. The parasite reaches the only place it can reproduce. The cycle continues. Humans aren't the target. We're accidental hosts. dead ends in the parasite's life cycle. But we get infected the same way mice do. The infection rate varies dramatically by location and culture. In some regions of Brazil, over 67% of the population tests positive for Toxoplasma antibodies. In France, it's around 55%. In the United States, about 11%. In the UK, roughly 22%. The differences come down to food preparation habits, climate, and cat population density. The primary infection route in humans is consuming undercooked meat. Pork, lamb, and venison are the biggest culprits. When these animals eat contaminated vegetation, Toxoplasma forms cysts in their muscle tissue. If you eat that meat without cooking it thoroughly, you ingest the parasites. The second major route is environmental contamination. Gardening without gloves in soil where cats have defecated. Drinking untreated water from sources contaminated by cat feces. Eating unwashed fruits and vegetables. Cleaning a cat's litter box without proper hygiene. There's also congenital transmission. If a woman gets infected for the first time during pregnancy, the parasites can cross the placenta and infect the developing fetus. This can cause severe complications, including brain damage, vision loss, and developmental disorders. That's why pregnant women are warned about handling cat litter. But here's what most people don't know. If you were infected before pregnancy, you've already developed antibodies. Those antibodies protect the fetus. The danger is new infections during pregnancy, not old ones. And it doesn't just sit there dormant. Studies show infected humans take more risks. They have slower reaction times, higher rates of schizophrenia, are more likely to start businesses and, well, more likely to die in car accidents. These aren't fringe theories. These are peer-reviewed findings published in respected scientific journals over the past 2 decades. Let's break down what the research actually shows. Reaction time studies consistently demonstrate that infected individuals respond slower to stimuli. We're talking about delays measured in milliseconds. That doesn't sound like much, but when you're driving at highway speeds, milliseconds determine whether you avoid an accident or cause one. A study analysing traffic accidents in Turkey found that people involved in traffic accidents were 2.6 times more likely to test positive for Toxoplasma than a control group. Another study in the Czech Republic found infected drivers had a higher rate of traffic violations and accidents. The mental health correlations are even more disturbing. Multiple studies have found significantly higher Toxoplasma infection rates in people diagnosed with schizophrenia compared to the general population. One meta-analysis combining data from over 40 studies found infected individuals were almost twice as likely to develop schizophrenia. The mechanism appears to involve dopamine dysregulation. Remember, Toxoplasma increases dopamine production. Excessive dopamine activity is strongly linked to psychotic symptoms, but it's not all negative changes. Some studies found infected individuals showed higher levels of entrepreneurship and were more likely to start their own businesses. They displayed more extroverted behaviour. They took more calculated risks. On the surface, these might seem like positive traits. But think about what's happening. These aren't personality developments from life experience or conscious choice. These are behavior modifications caused by a parasite manipulating neurotransmitter levels to serve its own evolutionary agenda. The personality changes appear gender-specific in some research. Infected men showed higher levels of rule-breaking behavior, suspiciousness, and jealousy. Infected women showed the opposite, becoming more outgoing, warm-hearted, and conscientious. Why would the parasite create opposite effects by gender? We don't know yet, but the fact that it does suggests highly specific neural manipulation, not random brain damage. So, how does a microscopic parasite actually change human behavior? The answer lies in sophisticated biochemical manipulation that, honestly, scientists are still working to fully understand. What we know so far is precise and, well, a bit disturbing. Toxoplasma produces an enzyme called tyrosine hydroxylase. This is the same enzyme human neurons use to synthesize dopamine. Essentially, the parasite manufactures dopamine directly inside brain cysts. This floods surrounding neural tissue with excess dopamine, altering the reward and motivation circuits. But, it goes deeper. The parasite secretes proteins that cross into neurons and directly alter gene expression. These proteins can turn genes on or off, changing how neurons function. Some of these changes affect the production of neurotransmitters. Others affect the receptors that neurons use to communicate with each other. The parasite is essentially reprogramming brain cells at the molecular level. Recent research identified another mechanism. Toxoplasma infection triggers chronic low-level inflammation in brain tissue. This neuroinflammation doesn't cause obvious symptoms, but it subtly alters brain chemistry over years or even decades. Some researchers believe this chronic inflammation may contribute to neurological conditions that develop later in life, though this remains controversial and frankly heavily debated in the scientific community. Perhaps most unsettling, the parasite appears to target specific brain regions. Cysts are not randomly distributed. They form preferentially in the amygdala, which processes fear and emotional responses, and in regions involved in decision-making and risk assessment. This isn't random infection. It's strategic colonization of the exact brain areas the parasite needs to manipulate to achieve its evolutionary goal. You might think it's your personality, your risk tolerance, your impulsiveness, but what if it's not you? What if it's a microscopic organism adjusting the chemistry in your brain to serve its own reproduction? This raises philosophical questions that, honestly, make most people uncomfortable. How much of what we call personality is actually us versus biological influences we don't control and aren't even aware of? If a parasite can alter risk-taking behavior, decision-making processes, and emotional responses, where does the parasite's influence end and your genuine self begin? Consider this scenario. You're infected, though you don't know it. Over the years, you've made certain life choices. You started a business. You moved to a new city. You pursued relationships others considered risky. You've always thought of yourself as brave, adventurous, someone who follows their gut. But what if those gut feelings were actually dopamine signals amplified by parasitic manipulation? What if the choices that defined your identity were subtly influenced by an organism trying to get eaten by a cat? The scientific community debates this heavily. Some researchers argue the behavioral changes are too small to meaningfully affect individual choice. Others believe the cumulative effects over decades of infection could substantially alter life trajectories. What we know for certain is that Toxoplasma physically changes brain chemistry in measurable ways, and those chemical changes correlate with behavioral differences in large population studies. Whether that constitutes mind control or just biological influence remains a question without consensus. You can get tested, but honestly, most people never do, because even if you knew, there's no cure. It's already there, and it's not leaving. A simple blood test can detect Toxoplasma antibodies, proving you've been infected at some point. But antibodies don't tell you when infection occurred or how many cysts are currently in your brain. There are antibiotic treatments, but they only work during active infection when parasites are reproducing and moving through your bloodstream. Once the parasites form cysts in your brain, they're protected from antibiotics. They're protected from your immune system. They're, well, permanent. Prevention is the only real defense. Cook meat to safe internal temperatures. Wash fruits and vegetables thoroughly. Wear gloves when gardening. If you have a cat, have someone else clean the litter box daily or wear gloves and a mask when doing it yourself. Change the litter before oocysts become infectious, which takes 1 to 5 days. These precautions aren't paranoia, they're basic parasitology. The parasite that makes mice suicidal around cats is doing something to your brain too. We're only beginning to understand what. If this fundamentally changed how you see the relationship between biology and behavior, subscribe to Untold Realms right now. We're exploring the hidden forces shaping life on Earth that most people never question. Share this video with everyone you know who owns a cat or gardens or eats meat, because this information matters. Drop a comment telling us whether you think you might be infected and whether you'd even want to know. The natural world is far stranger and more disturbing than we've been taught. And these revelations are just the beginning.